The Senate is back from its latest recess, taking up a bill to keep the federal student loan rate from doubling on July 1st. Of course, this version of the bill will pay for the rate extension by killing big oil subsidies. That is a political posture and, of course, a non-starter with Republicans. On the flip side, there is a House version, a also politically postured non-starter with Democrats. Yes, these people want to solve our problems. The White House, of course, also with the Democrats rejecting the Republican version of the extended benefits for our students because the Republican version will come at the expense of preventative health funding. Of course, neither of these plans does a darn thing to solve the debt for diploma system that we've trapped our students in or to seize the newly emergent methods that are allowing a collapse in the cost of learning around the world, and yet we continue to pay more and more and more. It's crazy. Anyway, it does make for a good political pro wrestling because it lets you have the oil subsidies versus preventative health. And what kind of person are you? Anyway, useless for education. Joining us now, Congressman Joe Courtney from Connecticut, who calls the entire debate a big charade, lest you think that I'm the only person offering these sorts of rather severe opinions. Congressman, this is no joke. A society without a functioning and expanding culture of learning is doomed. We are trending in a bad direction, it would seem.
Definitely. We're 54 days away from the interest rate doubling. This past weekend, a lot of schools were heading home for the end of the spring term, and financial aid offices, families, all of the folks that really are about the next class entering in the fall are scratching their heads trying to figure out, how to budget for next year's term. And as you point out, we're at a point where student debt now exceeds all other types of consumer debt. This is probably some of the most important investment a society can make, and yet we're 54 days out. Actually, neither House or Senate was in session last week, and there's no clear picture yet about how this is going to shake out.
So you've been at this certainly longer than I and a lot of folks, and you're closer and deeper into these conversations than most folks in America. Give me the benefit of the doubt, much like the debt ceiling, that whatever this is, it'll be resolved in 50-some-odd days after the political theater, after it'll be good for cable ratings. We'll talk about it. We'll be like, oh, those bastards, and we'll be the villains and the heroes. It'll feel good. And then when it's all said and done, we will still have the base problem. How do those of us who actually want to improve the conversation about learning basically seize on the pro wrestling conversation to turn it into a bigger conversation? What can we do?
Sure. Well, the good news is, Dylan, the last time I was on this show about 2 months ago, we were in the middle of a complete vacuum. I mean, utter vacuum at that point. The president had raised this issue in the State of the Union address for 3 solid months. There really had been no response in terms of any serious effort to get a bill together to avoid going off a cliff on July 1st. And I give you credit. You held a series of shows talking about the student loan debt crisis. And, the good news is at least there was some impact from this external pressure. The president's trips to college campuses around the country, I think, was a terrific way to put the spotlight on this issue. And the power of this issue really, I think, at least we finally saw it really come to fruition when Speaker Boehner overnight suddenly threw this bill on the floor, because I think he recognized this is a broad-based, middle-class, independent voter issue that people really, really care about. So, I actually do think there's going to be some stew of pay-fors that people are going to finally come together, a la some of the other, manufactured crises that we've had over the last 18 months. But long-term, as you point out, a one-year fix hardly solves the student loan, higher education affordability crisis which exists in the country, and that's really one of those long-term issues that your prior guests were talking about that really should be front and center in this election in 2012. I'm not sure it will, but it is a profoundly important issue for this country.
Yeah, and I take hope just in that regardless of the election, there's so much shared best practices coming out from so many folks on how to enhance learning, and the cost of learning is falling so fast that regardless of whatever the government does, I do feel that the capacity for people to adopt these new learning practices and cultures is exploding, which may be one of our best bets. Is that unreasonable?
Absolutely. Not at all. I can point to my son, who finished a semester early, at 4 years at Georgetown, which, but kids are going to community colleges to get transferable credits, much more affordable. Again, they're being at least much much more, I think, savvy in terms of the decision about where they're going to go, what they're going to study, and that, again, shows a good, smart response from people and families all across the country. But frankly, they can't do it alone. The private student loan market is a nightmare in terms of, as bad as this Stafford doubling of rates, the private loan market is far worse and far less consumer or student protections in it. And that's really where we need public policy makers to get serious about recognizing this is probably the most important national priority.
Yeah.
I know that sounds kind of hysterical, but in the long term, there's just no question that the payback to a country's economic growth is the largest of all.
Yeah, no, listen, it's hard to dispute it. The hyperbole sometimes is accurate. Joe Courtney out of Connecticut, thank you, Congressman. Appreciate your time today.